Yes, we do. And that really goes back to our being damaged throughout slavery, because we've served others for so long and that we haven't served ourselves. So we have a warped opinion of service. It's overbalanced. So we've overbalanced it in another area and achieved and underbalanced in our own. We've served everybody but ourselves. So we see service as a weakness rather than as a strength. Now,
could you read that quote again?
I was just gonna do that. It's amazing.
You're on the same frequency.
Yeah.
Genesis.
Whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your or her be your servant. Whoever desires to become great. So in greatness, there's a process.
And service is wrapped up in that process.
Service is the serving others and serving your nation, serving your family, community and nation is the road to greatness.
But we want to be great without being servants.
We do.
We're trying to get to that we're trying to get to that greatness, those great heights, those elevated heights by not being a servant or seen as a servant. We want to be seen as a leader, but not a follower.
Yeah. And we want to be ladies of leisure without learning how to be ladies first, because there's work in there. There's a responsibility and a work that has to be done before I sit down and relax. It's like God, it says in the Bible and in the Quran that God built the world, or he created in 6 days or in 6 periods. And on the 7th was a day of rest. So there's a period of work and there's a time of rest and reflection. And we tend to want to rest and relax and be served and be waited upon without doing any waiting.
It's interesting. I'm writing down this running from service thing. But, we started, I think I started by saying that, bringing the mountain to Muhammad. If Muhammad won't come to the mountain, and Muhammad meaning the brothers and the sisters who are, born in submission to the will of Allah, but run from that submission once knowledge comes to us. So the mountain, meaning Allah, God's government, his mind, has to come after us as individuals because we're running from service. And I was reading in the surah about the mountain, in the Quran, that both Prophet Muhammad and Moses received their message on the mountain.
Yeah.
Their message, which was service to your community and nation.
Yeah.
Black man and woman.
Yeah.
I leave it at that.
Okay. And our title today, because Brother always reminds me that I forget to give the title.
Right at the end, you usually give it.
Our title today is a silver service.
Ooh.
And silver, we know, is a precious metal that comes out of the earth. But silver service is the highest standard that waiters can attain. So it's a high standard. It's the highest standard that there is of service in waiting and waitressing. Now, that's the highest standard that we can achieve, or that people can achieve in this society. Now, in it being the highest standard, that means it's the best, brothers and sisters, and we deserve the best. Our children deserve the best. And when we're talking about education, it's not just our children that we're talking about. We're talking about one another. We're talking about husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, families, community and nation, because it's all about drawing the best out of one another. That's what education is. And we can talk about it for the rest of our lives, but living it and working it and walking it is the best way to draw good out of somebody else. But we deserve the best. Now, I was thinking about service, and I was thinking about when we first got together and we were going to a party. We were at a party. Do you remember?
Yes.
And there was food and everything.
Dance.
Yeah, and there was food there. And
In the bogle.
I was going to get you a plate of food. I was going to get you some food. And there were some sisters there and they were saying, no, don't get him a plate of food. Let him get it himself. And I was saying, but no, I want to. And they were saying, no, you don't. And I was saying, but I do. And they were saying, no, you don't. You should let him get it himself. If you're together, then you need to start as you mean to go on and let him get it himself. And I was like, but I want to. I don't mind doing it. And I wanted to.
And a debate raged.
Yeah, and
over whether you got this food or not.
Yeah, or whether
I stood in the corner, minding my own business,
eating.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and it was, that was a long time ago. That was what, 12, 13 years ago? That's a long time. But that was it was a discussion amongst us whether we should do that and whether we should get a plate of food for the brother or not.
Serve our partners or not. Yeah.
Serve our partners or not. And I was willing to do it. I wanted to do it. I was going to get something for myself. I didn't see why I shouldn't get something for you as well. But they saw it as a weakness rather than a strength, and rather than putting myself in a position of power and authority. But we're taught within Islam that you love that which you serve. And I looked at it, and when we look at our babies and our children, when we first have our babies, brothers and sisters, we spend a lot of time we feed on demand every 3 hours. And that's how our love for the babies and the children grow. For our husband and our wife, the more we serve is the more we love. And then I looked back at...
That's a deep
it's heavy.
Statement, sister.
It's really intense, because I looked at... I then went back and looked at how... every nation has its own natural resources.
Okay.
And every nation being given their own acts of devotion and their own way of extracting the natural resources out of the earth. And the documentary that Jay and I watched about the Congolese people, and how what happened with the people of the Congo is that they had to stop hunting on their own land. And in stopping hunting from their own land, that means that they couldn't feed themselves. So what
they were forced to stop hunting, but
it was made illegal.
The government, who was obviously controlled by some outside force who wanted the resources of the land.
Exactly. Go ahead. Thank you. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
Filling in. Anyway, that's what they did. They were hunting for themselves, brothers and sisters, was made illegal. So then what they had to do now is then they had to then go and depend on the government to find them jobs. Now, what then happened was, it just so happened that the government was setting up resorts and holiday resorts for the people, which meant that they were going to start having to serve tourists. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You love that which you serve.
Exactly.
So what did they love?
Right. So now with more and more white people and Caucasians and Europeans and Westerners going into their environment, that meant that they started to serve them more, which meant the black people, the original people, the Congolese people, stopped looking at one another as being helpers and providers for one another. And they started looking at the white people and the Westerners as those who were providing for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Which meant that we turned from one another and we started looking at strangers. So then I looked at how God says in the Bible, how can you love your brother? How can you love God who you've never seen and hate your brother or sister who you see every single day? I was like, but that's simple, because we don't serve one another. And because we don't serve one another, because we refuse to serve one another, and because we're taught in this environment not to serve one another and just to serve somebody else, we then stop loving one another. And then I said, but hold on, but isn't that a form of killing? Isn't that how our nation is being killed? Because our teenagers are out in the streets. We see that they lack so many things. We see that they need so many things, but that service isn't being provided for them. We have skills, brothers and sisters. Doctors, solicitors, lawyers, bakers, printers. There's so many things that we have the skills. We have the skills, but we're not serving our people. We're not serving one another in order for us to learn, or for our children to learn and take it onto a higher level.
There's a saying on the streets that the skills to pay the bills. We have the skills to pay the bills. So really our service is tied to some kind of financial reward. And obviously to make a living, to make a way in this society, your skills or whatever you have to offer has to be tied to some kind of finance. So, it's interesting that this is entitled silver service. So our service, which is on a very low level, when we do serve, we serve the plantation. It's a copper service. We're serving for coppers, or it may be paper service, because, we talk about the papers. It's all about the papers. Brother Rashid was videoing some of the youth, and they were saying it's all about the papers, either the education papers, the papers that you get once you finish your education, or the papers that you get from the salary sort of thing. So it's paper service, it's copper and nickel service, the level of service that we do enter into, and it's not a service based upon love. Which sometimes I think we need to break that finance service kind of barrier.
That's very important. I think that's why some of the nations in Africa and other countries throughout the earth, they do national service. They have a national service where